Coming up on Yao on Sports, a lawsuit from former Dolphins head coach Brian Flores suing the NFL and three of its teams, including the Dolphins, Broncos, and Giants. What it means for the league going forward. And that was not the only big news out of the NFL. Tom Brady officially announces his retirement on Instagram. He's recognized as the GOAT of football, but where does he rank among American athletes all time? And in the NBA, the All-Star teams are finally revealed, but were some key names left off the list. It is Yao on Sports. Let's go. Welcome to Yao on Sports. I'm Yao Bonsu. Today we begin with troubling news out of the NFL. Former Dolphins head coach Brian Flores is suing the NFL and three of its teams, the Dolphins, Broncos, and Giants. Flores says Denver and New York were discriminatory in the process of his interviews. Flores goes on to mention that former Denver GM John Elway was hung over the day of his interview with the Broncos in 2019. And this year, Flores says the Giants already had their guy chosen before Flores was set to interview. This comes as Flores provided private text messages from Patriots head coach Bill Belichick congratulating him for winning the Giants job, once again, before Flores was even interviewed. The problem is that Coach Belichick actually texted the wrong Brian. Instead, he meant to text the now Giants head coach, Brian Daboll. In the text messages, Belichick acknowledges his mistake, but Flores still went in for the interview anyways, knowing that he was not getting the job. For Miami, Flores alleges that owner Stephen Ross offered him $100,000 to tank games after being hired in 2019. And if you remember, that season the team won its final 2 games down the stretch, putting them out of the running for the #1 overall pick, who was eventually Joe Burrow. But Flores was told by GM Chris Greer that Ross was mad due to the team's draft position being compromised. I first want to commend Brian Flores for speaking up on the alleged injustices that are going on around the NFL. The Rooney Rule was instituted in 2003, requiring teams to interview at least one minority candidate who was not already with the team. When that rule was put in place, there were 3 black coaches. But since then, there have been 127 head coach vacancies, and only 27 have been filled by minorities. That according to the Associated Press. And it is 2022, and there's currently only 1 black coach, Mike Tomlin. So if these allegations prove to be true, it would in no way, shape, or form be surprising. But it does make the Giants look the worst. Allow me to explain. The Giants are the only team in NFL history to never hire a black coach. It is the final team in NFL history to start a black quarterback, and that was Geno Smith. Now for the Dolphins, if it is true that Stephen Ross actually offered $100,000 per loss, that should be a wrap for his ownership. The NFL at that point has to come together and force him to sell the team. Offering money to a coach to tank games would have immediately compromised the integrity and competitiveness of the game of football. So there really isn't much to say there. But here's the bottom line. I will never, ever make anybody go out their way to hire an African American or tell anybody to do so. This is corporate America, and I say that because the NFL is a business. We know how it goes. In corporate America, you are supposed to hire the best candidate for the job. But the NFL's problem is that the best candidates for these head coaching jobs are black. Byron Leftwich and Eric Bieniemy are looking unlikely to get head coaching jobs. Yet Nathaniel Hackett gets a job after coaching the quarterback that Denver is looking to acquire this offseason. But wait, Eric Bieniemy and Byron Leftwich each coached elite talent too. But don't they have Super Bowl rings? Oh yeah, and Hackett does not. Kansas City has ranked in the top 6 every year Bieniemy has been offensive coordinator and only placed outside the top 3 1 time. But why am I not mad? Because this is expected of the NFL. These teams will not realize how bad they messed up until they actually fail. But clearly, this is a trend. African American candidates are somehow being overlooked in the head coaching process despite being the best candidates for the job. And this is why I commend Brian Flores, because he is shedding a light on the alleged injustices in the NFL. And of course, we can't speak on it more until all the facts are known. The NFL says it will investigate Flores' allegations against the Dolphins, and as more details are released, I will discuss them all on this show. In some other NFL news, Tom Brady is officially retiring. The 7-time Super Bowl champion is tops in wins, starts, passing yards, passing touchdowns, as well as a long line of postseason stats. If there's one thing that is indisputable about Brady, it is that he is the greatest football player ever. He was the best player at the most important position for nearly his entire career, and that alone is something to just marvel at. But Brady has put himself in such rarefied air that it is time to consider whether or not he is the greatest American athlete of all time, or athlete in general. And for that, what we are going to do is my top 5 greatest athletes ever. Some people I was blessed enough to witness while covering sports. Others, it takes a lot of listening to stories and watching a lot of documentaries to get a sense of one's greatness. But nevertheless, here are my top 5 athletes of all time. At number 5, give me Tom Brady. No football player has been as dominant at any position as Tom Brady was over the course of his career. 7 Super Bowl rings, 3 All-Pro nods, 3 MVPs, over 600 touchdowns, and over 84,000 passing yards. Not to mention the dozens of comebacks and game-winning drives. They said he couldn't win without Belichick. They said he goes out and wins a ring with only the Patriots, but then he does it with the Bucs. He retired this year after leading the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns, all at the young age of 44. Simply put, that type of dominance will never be replicated in the sport again. Tom Brady's the greatest football player ever, but he ain't the greatest athlete ever. At number 4, gives me Simone Biles. But how can a 24-year-old be considered one of the greatest ever? Well, I'll tell you how. Simone Biles is the most decorated gymnast of all time. 19 gold world championship medals, 3 silver, 3 bronze at 24 years old. And that's not to mention her 4 Olympic golds. Yeah, she got the twisties at the 2020 Olympics, but if you're going to hold winning silver and bronze medals against her, that alone shows how great she is, because you expected nothing but gold at this point. Before the 2020 Olympics, she hadn't lost an all-around competition in 7 years. She's the first woman to land a Yurchenko double piking competition, which if you don't know what it is, you absolutely have to look it up. Pure athleticism, combined with her achievements and dominance compared to her fellow gymnasts, is a gap that is too large to leave her off this list. And Lord knows she has a lot more gymnastics to go in her career. Simone Biles is number 4, but considering she is 24, I really wouldn't be surprised to see her near the top later in her career. At number 3 is the most decorated Olympian of all time, the Baltimore Bullet, the Flying Fish, Michael Phelps. Let's start with this. Michael Phelps is the greatest Olympian of all time. 28 medals, including 23 gold in just 5 Olympic Games. It is seriously ridiculous how dominant Phelps was over the span of his career. At every step of his career came another broken record. Youngest man on the U.S. Olympic swim team in 68 years. The lowest he placed in any Olympics is 5th, and that was back in 2000. World championships, national titles, world records. He has more of those than any other swimmer in history. With the Olympics being seen as the pinnacle of athletics, it only makes sense to have its most dominant performer at number 3. But Phelps is great, but he ain't the other 2. And at number 2, give me Serena Williams. An open era record, 23 Grand Slam titles, and en route to those titles has beat 12 different players ranked number 1. Do I really need to go on? Serena Williams is the greatest female athlete of all time, and she is number 2 on my list of greatest athletes, period. But let's not also forget, she has won 85% of her matches, and she's racked up some pretty good prize money, if I do say so myself, totaling at over $94 million, which is tops all time. Serena hasn't been on any dominating stretch recently, but let it be known, she has been dominating the sport of tennis for a long, long time, and is simply the greatest tennis player ever. It may be the new age of players as far as women's tennis goes, but let it be known, Serena Williams is the pinnacle of tennis, but she is not the greatest athlete of all time. The greatest athlete of all time is none other than Muhammad Ali. There are two sides to Muhammad Ali being the greatest athlete of all time. First, you have his in-ring performance, winning a gold medal in the light heavyweight division, or in the lightweight division, being the youngest boxer to unseat a reigning heavyweight champion, having those big moments like the fight of the century versus Joe Frazier, the Rumble in the Jungle, the Thriller in Manila, all of that. But you know what trumps it all? How he was bigger than sports. April 28th, 1967, Muhammad Ali is convicted of draft evasion, stripped of the heavyweight title, suspended from boxing, and sentenced to 5 years in prison. 5 years. I couldn't even get it out. The heavyweight champion of the world, a top-tier athlete and celebrity, puts all the money, all the endorsements on the line to stand for what he believes in. It's simply remarkable. It is a whole nother level of leadership, sacrifice, and perseverance than to come back and upset George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle and to beat Joe Frazier in the Thriller in Manila. It shows how much Ali lost and how he came back to reclaim his throne in exceptional fashion. A man once known as Cassius Clay was more than a boxer. He was a champion of change. Muhammad Ali is the GOAT of GOATs. Now for some NBA news, the All-Star teams are set. In the Western Conference, LeBron will serve as a captain yet again. He is undefeated in the new All-Star format. He joins Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, John Morant, and Andrew Wiggins as starters. And on the bench, both Phoenix and Utah get 2 reserves each, with Booker, Paul, Gobert, and Mitchell. And rounding out the West reserves are Luka Doncic, Draymond Green, and Karl Anthony Towns. Honestly, every pick here is spot on. The only argument, and we'll get into the Eastern Conference in a bit, is DeJounte Murray on San Antonio. Murray's averaging 20 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists. The only players to have such numbers are him and Luka Doncic, who was named a reserve. That tells you what you need to know as far as the display that Murray is putting on this season. But the Spurs are 19-34. You can make that argument that DeJounte Murray is playing better basketball than Chris Paul or Draymond Green, and I really wouldn't argue with you, but it is impact on winning that ultimately holds Murray back from being named an All-Star. However, that does not really mean he can't be named an alternate, because remember, Draymond Green announced that he won't play. So in my estimation, Murray probably gets that spot, and it is well-deserved. But nevertheless, overall, the West at least proved to be solid this year. But what about the East? Kevin Durant leads the way as the captain. Joining him as a starter is Giannis Antetokounmpo, DeMar DeRozan, Joel Embiid, and Trae Young. As far as the reserves, that is where things get a little bit interesting. First-time All-Star and home team Cleveland's very own Darius Garland is joined by Jimmy Butler, James Harden, Zach LaVine, Chris Middleton, Jason Tatum, and going undrafted to All-Star Fred VanVleet. So I said the Western Conference was pretty good as far as who made it, but I cannot say the same about the East. The Charlotte Hornets are the 8th seed in the competitive Eastern Conference. Where's LaMelo Ball? That's really my only question. Where is LaMelo Ball? I'll make it easy for you guys. Chris Middleton and LaMelo Ball. Let's put the numbers, let's put the comparison up. Ball is clearly having a better year. And yes, the Bucks are on top of the conference while the Hornets are further down, but come on. It's not a large margin at all. The East is actually competitive this year. The biggest robbery from the list is without question LaMelo Ball. And to see what he is doing in his second year leading that Charlotte team, it deserves some love. I would argue that Middleton is not even the second best player for the Bucks this season. I'd give it to Drew Holiday because of how great of a two-way player he is. But that might just be me. But also, Miami recently climbed to the top of the Eastern Conference standings, so Tyler Hero. He has remained healthy for Miami this season and is the leading candidate for 6th Man of the Year without question. There was a stretch of games where Jimmy Butler was out, but it is Tyler Hero who kept the Heat alive, and it is Tyler Hero that has Miami looking legit enough to get home court advantage throughout the East playoffs. But overall, I can't complain. The All-Star voters, fans, players, coaches, they got it right. And for that, kudos to all of you. That'll do it for this edition of Yao on Sports. It was a packed edition. We talked some NBA All-Stars, we talked the Brian Flores case, and of course, we dove into Tom Brady's retirement. But we'll have much more news, much more content. Follow me on social media at Yao on Sports, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, MySpace, whatever you use nowadays. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.